In the name of God, the Holy and Undivided Trinity. Amen. In spite of all our complaints that America's economy could be better, we all know that we are privileged to live in a wealthy nation. When we see the abject poverty and all the social ills that contribute to it and those that result from it in poorer societies, thoughtful people have to be shocked by the contrast to even the humblest conditions of our own. Believe it or not, living with wealth possesses problems. You'd think we'd learn to be satisfied with our possessions and what they can do for us. A reporter once asked the late John D. Rockefeller Sr. how much money it takes to make a wealthy man happy. And Mr. Rockefeller replied, just a little more. Another reporter in another day asked Aristotle Onassis what was the secret of living with wealth, and he said 3 things. You have to learn to live with debt. You have to pay your debts on time, and you have to always keep a good tan. We Christians have an advantage when it comes to living successfully with our wealth, because about 50% of Jesus' teaching and preaching has to do with our relationship with possessions, not to mention other mentions by St. Paul and other writers in the New Testament. Christians have an advantage. The Gospels are filled with guidance that can help us and people of faith in any age live with wealth. Jesus knew that our possessions were the things that are most likely to interfere with our relationship with God, our relationship with our neighbors, and our relationship with our own sense of identity and purpose. Today's reading from the Gospel according to Luke is one of the main examples and one of the most direct. In response to a request to adjudicate a family feud over an inheritance, Jesus warns, take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. To drive his point home, he tells a parable about a farmer who has become so successful that he decides to pull down all his barns and build bigger ones to store all his grain and all his goods. And then he says to his soul, "Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" And Jesus concludes, "So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not generous toward God." Why do you suppose Jesus was so harsh with this man? Was it because of the power, popularity, prestige, and position of his acquisition of wealth that made possible? I don't think so. At no point in his ministry did Jesus ever make a sweeping condemnation of wealth. Actually, I believe he might have applauded the man for his accomplishments. His complaint against this farmer was not that he was successful or that he was wealthy, but that he was incapable of living with it. Carlyle's words come to mind. For the one person who can stand prosperity, there are 100 who can stand adversity. And the counsel of Jesus can help us live with our wealth too, however much or little it may be, and to save us from the delusions that it can create. He wants us to avoid the temptation to confuse the means of living with the end of life. The tragedy of the farmer was that he had everything to live for, everything to live with, and nothing to live for. He had only the illusion of freedom because, in truth, he was possessed by his possession. There is available to us a richness of the spirit, a quality of life that is infinitely more important than success in the things that pass away. Jesus also wants us to know the grace of gratitude that saves us from inflation of the ego. We'll know the ego is inflated when we begin to feel that our achievements are all our own. When we lose the feeling of gratitude to God and to others who have contributed to our lives, we ought to know we are in serious trouble. Gratitude, as we say in the general thanksgiving, for our creation, preservation, and all the blessings of this life is essential to living with any amount of wealth. And then finally, he wants us to see our success in life and the wealth it brings in light of the ways it can enrich us toward God. The thing that really matters is not how hard we drive ourselves to achieve success, but the recognition of the one who is the author of our lives. The great things that abide are not fields and grain and barns, trust funds, IRAs, but those values of the human spirit that relate us to the source, the ground, and the fulfillment of our very being. In the early part of the last century, there was a man in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who made a fortune in oil. He was a member of the Boston Avenue Methodist Church there. When his church decided to build a magnificent edifice to the glory of God and the service of the world, he promptly and generously provided the funds necessary to build the church's great tower that soars 18 stories into the air, and even today is a prominent landmark on the Tulsa skyline. And then during the Great Depression, he lost everything. And he was reduced to almost abject poverty. One Sunday morning, a man who knew him saw him standing on the corner across the street from the church, just looking up at the tower. The man approached him and said, "I'll bet you wish you had the money now that you put into that building." And the bankrupt oil man turned to him, and with eyes that reflected a deep sense of peace, he said, "No, that is the best investment I ever made. I can come here anytime I want, day or night, and be reminded of how God helped me in the past when things were going well, and how God sustains me now, and how God will guide me as I sort things out. It will help me keep things in perspective as I continue to live whatever the future may hold." Now that man recovered financially, although he never again knew the great wealth he had before the crash. But what is more important is he knew a peace that came from a healthy and right relationship with his Creator. Christ was all in all for him. Above all else, despite the fluctuations of his worldly wealth, he had become rich toward God. May we also, in our own lives, with whatever possessions, whatever authority, whatever influence, whatever statue we may have, be rich and generous toward God, putting him first in our lives. Amen.